one of the properties money has is to be a store of value. It's supposed to store economic energy and to be able to preserve it for the long haul. But what happens when the money is broken, when there is a leak in the system? Well, that is the purpose of today's episode. Thank you for joining me again. As I just mentioned, today we're going to talk about a function of money, which is for it to be a store of value, for it to be the equivalent of an economic battery. So think about a regular battery, maybe the one that you have on your cell phone. It is a very efficient one. It will last you for as long as you use it. But let's assume that you don't use your cell phone for a couple years. What kind of percentage of that battery do you think your cell phone will hold after a couple years of it not being used? It won't be 100%. I can assure you that there will be some leakage or deterioration because storing energy takes some sort of resource. So, and there is always some loss and some drain that happens over time. So today, let's not talk about cell phone batteries. Let's talk about money as a way to store economic power, economic energy. And if you think about it, it's a problem that we have tried to solve over time as a species. In the past, we used to transact with commodities, let's say with livestock. So the problem with livestock, as you can imagine, is, okay, you're spending some energy, some time to grow it, to feed it, to take care of it. And then you actually have a cow that you want to sell to someone else. Well, the problem is the cow, you cannot keep it for 100 years. You cannot basically hand it down to other generations. The cow will die eventually, has an expiration or shelf life. And for you to transact with this livestock or this commodity, you also need to transport it. You need to keep feeding it. You need to protect it. So there are things that drain some of the energy that you put up front to create this commodity. So over time, we moved to metals and we moved to gold as a better avenue to store our economic energy, as a better economic battery. But think about it, and gold also has a few leaks here and there. To start with, you have the leak of new gold that is mined on a yearly basis. So, for instance, you need to know that today, the rate at which gold supply keeps getting increased is 2% per year, meaning there is about the entirety of the supply, that gold that we have today. Well, 2% of that supply gets added into circulation by new gold that gets still mined from the surface of the earth. Now, the same applies when it comes down to transacting with gold. If you want to transport gold, well, gold is heavy, and gold is also risky to transport because it's physical. So you need to protect it. You need to store it in a way that it won't be taken by somebody else. So transacting with it, verifying it, storing it, and then the dilution that you have from new supply that gets introduced on a yearly basis by miners, it's basically drainage that you have on this economic battery. Now, when we move from a gold standard to a fiat standard, to paper money basically, and even digital money in the form of bank accounts and credit cards and all this, yes, we remove a lot of the friction that it comes with storing, when it comes down to transporting, when it comes down to verifying. But please understand that even transacting with dollars, with pesos, with credit cards, it has a friction fee and it has a leakage as well, where you're losing part of what you work and invest your time and effort towards, which will be to preserve as much of that energy in this economic battery. Why? Because you're paying Visa, you're paying MasterCard, you're paying PayPal, you're paying your bank for all these transaction fees, for them to keep your money, for them to just move your money from one side to the other, for you to validate that what you're getting is actually money from someone else. So please understand that this form of economic batteries that we have right now are also broken when it comes down to their transaction way of moving it from one side to the other. But more importantly, the biggest leakage that fiat has nowadays is not the transaction cost. The biggest leakage is the inflation of the monetary supply. Why? Because, as we have discussed several times in this channel, there is absolutely nothing that prevents from a government to print more money, to add more dollars or pesos or euros into the circulation. So much like with gold, you have a 2% increase of gold supply that dilutes by 2% the economic power that you stored in gold in a yearly basis. Well, in the case of the dollar, which is the strongest currency that we have in the world, the world reserve currency, well, it loses 7% on average on a yearly basis. I think this year is about 11% that it has lost in value so far. And the reason why is because that is a rate in which they're printing that much more money that you work your ass off for. And they're just doing alchemy by creating new paper dollars, paper euros introduced into circulation and diluting the purchasing power that you stored in the so-called economic battery. So the reason that I want you to study Bitcoin is because, unlike gold, unlike fiat, Bitcoin is not controlled by anyone, and nobody can basically accelerate the rate at which Bitcoin gets created. Right now, with the Bitcoin supply schedule that it has, which is by code, by protocol, there is 3.125 new Bitcoins that get rewarded to a random miner every 10 minutes. And that reward gets cut in half every 4 years. So it means that over time, the issuance and the supply of Bitcoin gets reduced to zero, and the cap that it will ever get to will be 21 million Bitcoins. So at least from a new supply introduction, you know what you're dealing with, and you know that even though there's a slight leakage of energy right now, which you can assume, or you can basically calculate that this is the cost for you to sustain this decentralized network. Gold and fiat have way higher leakage of your economic power, and you have Bitcoin as something that conserves energy in a much better way. And unlike gold and unlike fiat, Bitcoin is frictionless or close to frictionless when it comes down to its transmissibility, its portability, its verification. You cannot basically fake a Bitcoin. You cannot have an incorrect or a transaction that is verified on the Bitcoin blockchain and you claim it to be inaccurate or fraudulent. It is set in stone. It is on a decentralized ledger that is visible by everyone. And you cannot basically have anyone diluting your economic power. So if you think of money as the way where you deposit your time, your effort, your contributions to society to store that energy over time, please understand that fiat, gold, commodities in general are not the best way for you to conserve that energy, whereas Bitcoin, that's why it's called a great store of value and a great way to accumulate digital capital, because it's a best way that we have found so far as humans to preserve it as much as possible without all these transaction fees or transaction costs for it to be stored, for it to be transmitted, for it to be verified. And at the same time, we don't have anyone basically accelerating or changing its supply schedule and the amount that new Bitcoin gets introduced into the market. So that is the Bitcoin advantage that I want you to realize today. And that's yet another layer of why it is a strong asset, something indestructible, unhackable, and something that keeps getting adopted by institutions, by governments. And think about it, when a government or a nation goes into war, there's no case in history where the winning country, the winning nation, takes the paper money from the other nation. What they take is the gold from the other nation. So just know that Bitcoin is harder to confiscate than gold, is an asset that is a better asset. Whoever holds the keys for that public address that is storing Bitcoin is the owner and can do whatever the hell they want with that Bitcoin. And unlike any other asset that we have described so far, it is the best and least prone to leakage economic battery that we have created. So anyway, hope this makes sense to you. Hope you have liked this episode, and please like, share, and subscribe. And until the next one, see ya.